A review that began in 2014 of antimicrobial resistance, it found something really troubling. 10 million people are going to die every year. That's the number from superbugs. This happening until 2050. That's the projection. Now, this study, it's prompted a massive global awareness campaign of those who don't know the risk. The most prominent voice highlighting this issue that I found is BBC Online Health editor James Gallagher. He cites the risk of antibiotic-resistant diseases, and he points out that these superbugs, they could spell out a future for us that rips into one of the greatest tools we have in medicine, antibiotics. It comes from people misusing them, not using them properly, taking them when they shouldn't. Elliot, I want to take you to what one chief medical officer had to say about this troubling report. She says that the golden age of antibiotics, which the world has taken for granted for well over 50 years, has ended. The projected futures are much more worrying, and it's quite possible and perhaps even likely that the recent era of material mortality improvements will give way to many years of material mortality worsening. And this comes down to the misuse of these drugs.
So the superbug, tell me about the superbug.
Well, okay, I'm happy to. There are a number of them: malaria, tuberculosis, things that had been eradicated and treated and that medical science had to clamp down on, things like E. coli, for example. People are rushing to take drugs when they shouldn't, and if they happen upon one of these, i.e. E. coli, the medicine that they've built up a resistance to is no longer effective and they die.
Right, so it's a virulent strain. So it's essentially a virulent strain, or a strain of the bug that then becomes resistant to any antibiotic treatment. And the reason for the antibiotic resistance is the fact that we're taking, we as a society take antibiotics when we have a viral infection as opposed to a bacterial infection. And what that does is, presumably, is that it attacks those good bacteria as well as other bacteria, but in the case of when you have a virus, it's irrelevant because that's not the problem. But it has a knock-on effect, and it attacks these bacteria, and therefore these bacteria, then it basically creates more problems because it then creates these virulent strains.
You're right.
And it lowers our immunity, etc.
It does. Diseases like gonorrhea, for example, or tuberculosis used to be easily treated, fairly easily treated. Now they pose the serious health threat because of the misuse of these drugs. Now, this campaign that's underway, a couple $2 billion have been projected to be put into making people aware. And one caveat of this that seems to be unavoidable, because as educated as you are about the use of medicine when you're sick, we really can't help the use of these drugs in our food supply, namely dairy. That's something that I found as a caveat to the story, that the agricultural industry treats cows with antibiotics because they want them very healthy, and poultry, then we eat it, and we can also grow resistance to these drugs in that way. So perhaps being more knowledgeable about what you're eating, as well as when to take medicine and when not to take medicine, could just save your life. You know, a couple of these cases mentioned in this report. One lady, she was fighting for her life after a simple UTI because she had a resistance built up to the medicine that she'd been prescribed. Another case was noted that somebody had a simple cut on their foot, developed a pretty serious infection that nearly killed them for the same reason. So when to use antibiotics and when not is critical, and it looks like if we don't learn these lessons, we could see as many as 10 million people die each and every year from new superbugs that we used to be able to treat easily.